The bullets kept missing the steel plate, one after another, echoing across the empty desert range like a reminder of failure. 5 of the Marine Corps' most promising young snipers stood frozen, their pride collapsing with every misfire. The sun hammered down, their breath hot with frustration, their confidence finally cracking. The target wasn't even that far. They had trained for years. But somehow, today everything was off. Then the sound of slow, steady footsteps broke the silence. An old man, stooped slightly, weathered by time and war, approached the line as if emerging from another era. His eyes were sharp, colder than the barrel of a rifle, radiating a strange mix of sorrow and wisdom. The Marines didn't know him. They didn't even know why he was there. But the moment he placed his hand on the old sniper rifle lying on the table, something shifted in the air. As if destiny had finally arrived, and none of them, not a single Marine, had any idea that this old veteran was about to change their lives forever. The Nevada desert wasn't usually this cruel. But on that particular morning, the heat rose from the ground in shimmers, distorting the air and clouding judgment. 5 elite Marine snipers were selected to qualify for an upcoming international demonstration, a prestigious event that showcased the absolute best the United States military had to offer. Every year, only the most accurate shooters made the cut. Missing wasn't an option. And yet, every single one of them was missing. Lance Corporal Hayes wiped the sweat from his brow, gritting his teeth. "I don't get it," he muttered. "Wind is steady. Scope is aligned. I'm doing everything right." And next to him, Private Torres shook his head helplessly. "Maybe we're just having a bad day." But deep down, they knew it wasn't just a bad day. It felt like something inside them, something essential, was slipping. Their instructor, Sergeant Miller, watched with growing concern. He had trained dozens of snipers over the years, and he knew what confidence looked like. But he also knew what fear looked like, and right now, his men were balancing on that dangerous edge. "We regroup. We breathe. We don't panic," Miller said firmly. "You've hit farther targets than this." But the encouragement wasn't landing. Their morale had tanked. That's when the creaking of old boots caught everyone's attention. An elderly man with a thick white beard and steady, practiced steps walked onto the range. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, they carried a weight none of the Marines could identify. Interrupting an active training session wasn't something anyone did casually. "Sir, this is a restricted area," Sergeant Miller said, stepping forward. The old man didn't break his gaze from the rifles lying on the bench. "Restricted areas never stopped me before." His voice was calm, but carried a depth that came from years of giving orders rather than receiving them. There was a moment of awkward silence. Then Miller's expression changed. Confusion softened into recognition. "Wait, are you?" The old man raised a hand. "Doesn't matter who I am. What matters is why your men can't hit a target that even a half-blind boot could tag in his sleep." Hayes bristled. "With all due respect, sir, we're doing everything by the book." The old man glanced at him, then at the wind, then at the target shimmering in the distance. He approached the table, fingers brushing the rifle stock as delicately as if touching the pages of a sacred text. "No," he said. "You're doing everything by the book, but nothing by the heart." The phrase hit the Marines with more force than a rifle recoil. He picked up the old, worn sniper rifle on the bench. A model so outdated that the Marines wondered how it was even still in service. The weapon looked like it belonged in a museum. Its wooden stock had scratches, dents, and a faded engraving worn down by decades of use. "Sir," Miller said quietly, "that's your rifle, isn't it?" The old man didn't answer. He just stared downrange, his breathing calm, his finger resting lightly along the trigger guard. "Watch closely, boys," he said. The Marines leaned in, some in curiosity, others in doubt. Without adjusting the scope, without even taking a second to settle in, the old man exhaled. The wind shifted softly. And then, crack, the shot echoed across the desert. A heartbeat passed. Then ding, the bullet hit dead center. Hayes' jaw dropped. Torres blinked in disbelief. Even Sergeant Miller looked stunned. The old man lowered the rifle with the ease of someone who had done the impossible so many times it had become muscle memory. "You're not shooting wrong," he said gently. "You're just not listening." "Listening to what?" Torres asked. The old man tapped his temple, then his chest. "Both." And with that single sentence, Chapter 1 closed with more questions than answers. The Marines gathered around him like students around a master storyteller. And in a way, that's exactly who he was. "My unit used to train out here," the old man said, dropping into a seat as he removed his cap. So the general marched directly toward them. Back when half this base was nothing but ground with enough force to silence the broken dreams. What unit was that? Hayes asked. The guards instinctively the old man smiled faintly, unsure of what they had done wrong, officially exist. But suddenly terrified, their eyes just widened. Insulted the wrong man. They didn't know if that meant special Arthur forces, looked up at Ethan with confusion in his storm gray eyes. But they knew they were sitting in the presence of someone extraordinary, as though he were speaking to another guard. He motioned toward the rifles. But Ethan shook his head. Shoot like you're afraid of missing. His voice was deep, steady, but laced with emotion. Fear doesn't steady your hand. Monsieur, it shakes it. Hale, you don't ask permission to be here. He pointed at Hayes. This funeral doesn't happen without you. That's why you're pulling the crowd, the cameras, Hayes blinked, the soldiers. No one had ever read him that quickly. Whispers spread like wildfire. The old man turned to Torres. Cha-cha. Who is he? And you're overthinking the win. Why is the general talking? You're counting numbers, not feeling direction. You're letting math blind instinct. Cha-cha, he bent down. Torres swallowed dust, covered the rest from the ground. The old veteran continued and placed it gently back into Arthur's trembling hands. He stood. The man we're burying today wanted you here more than motioning them to lie prone again. And I am not letting this funeral continue. Shoot until you walk through those gates with the honor you deserve. Close your eyes. They hesitated. Tieta. Do it. The guards' faces went pale. 5 Marines closed Arthur's eyes filled with tears. Now tell me, what do you hear? Not because of the honor. At first, nothing. Because someone still remembered. Whispered. When Ethan extended his arm. But Arthur hesitated. Sand shifting metal creaking in the shelter. Cha-cha, Ethan shook his head. Your own heart. Marcus told me everything. They listened. He said the old man knelt beside them when the rest of the world forgot. That's the rhythm of your shot. That's the metronome of a sniper. You gave up your career to protect younger soldiers. He said you were the bravest man he ever knew. The Marines inhaled deeply. Cha-cha, Arthur's breath Open your eyes. Cha-cha, they did. Those were Marcus's words. Now fire when your heart he thought had vanished long ago. Crack, 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 Cha-cha, the general stood tall. Chorus of rifle shots Then thundered. He did something that made the entire funeral gasp. Ding, ding, Cha-cha, he saluted ding, Arthur Hale. Every single round hit. The Marines shot up from their positions, but to a legacy. Overwhelmed. Cha-cha within almost emotional. The entire formation laughed in relief. Others rubbed their eyes and raising their hands in unity. You did that. Saluting the forgotten hero, looking at the old man. Just stepped back into the pages of history. The veteran replied softly. Cha-cha. Arthur tried to speak, Sergeant Miller, but his voice broke under the weight of emotion. I need to know your name. Ethan touched his shoulder. The old man chuckled. Come, I'm just someone who learned the hard way, so you boys don't have together. They walked past the gates. He began walking away, past the metal, his shadow stretching across the sand like a bridge between generations. Dismissed him. Cha-cha, Arthur placed his cap beside Marcus's casket out and whispered. The old man didn't stop walking. I made it, son. Maybe. Cha-cha, and for the first time in decades, you ever forget the sound of your own heartbeat, not as a name missing from a list, but as a man who finally received the honor he disappeared into the desert sunlight. A ghost of history, leaving behind nothing but wisdom, bullet holes, and 5 Marines who would never forget the lesson he carved into the wind.